Imagine this. A humanitarian mission, driven by this really deep conviction, heading towards a place, a population, under desperate siege.
Yeah, and then think about what happens when that mission runs into, well, alleged sabotage surveillance.
And then this dramatic interception. And right in the middle of it, a pretty prominent American labor leader. It's quite a story.
It really is a story of courage, sure, but also international law and just these surprising obstacles. That's what we're unpacking today.
Okay, so yeah, let's dive in. We're focusing this deep dive on the Handala aid ship mission to Gaza.
And specifically, the interception, the detention of the activists on board. We'll be paying close attention to Chris Smalls, the founder of the Amazon Labor Union.
It really feels like a point where, as you said, international law, humanitarian aid, and just individual bravery all collide, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's a flashpoint.
So for this deep dive, we've pulled from quite a range of sources. We've got firsthand accounts, video transcripts, reports from different news outlets, advocacy groups.
A real mix. The goal here, our mission, if you like, is to help you make sense of what is, let's face it, a pretty complex, multi-layered situation.
Right. We want to walk through the Handala's journey, look at the motivations, why take such a huge risk.
Explore the challenges they reportedly faced. These alleged sabotage attempts.
And then get into the details of the interception itself, the detentions.
And finally, sort of zoom out and think about the bigger picture. What does it all mean for international law, for global solidarity? Trying to piece it all together for you.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The mission's purpose, the people involved.
Right, the Handala. It's a part of a larger group called the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, you might see it, called the FFC.
And their main goal?
Pretty straightforward, really, to break what they describe as the illegal siege on Gaza. That's their stated aim.
And they frame it very explicitly as nonviolent, don't they? Driven by love and hope.
Exactly. That framing is key. It's a direct pushback against any narrative that might try to paint this as something other than humanitarian aid.
And the people on board really seem to reflect that. Who exactly was making this journey?
Well, there were 21 volunteers, activists, and a pretty significant number were American, about a third, 7 people. 3 from New York, actually.
And among them, Chris Smalls. He's a big name, right? Founder of the Amazon Labor Union, the ALU.
That's him. Also affiliated with the Teamsters. A well-known figure in the U.S. labor movement, definitely.
So what were they actually carrying? We hear aid ship. What does that mean in this case?
It's fascinating when you look at the list. Yes, the essentials were there. Baby formula, diapers, medical supplies, food. Really crucial stuff.
But it wasn't just that, was it?
No, and this is where it gets, quite symbolic. They also had things like prosthetic parts, stuffed animals, even drawings from children.
Wow. That sends a message.
It really does. It's like they were making this powerful, explicit statement. This is about humanity. And also, crucially, that there were absolutely no weapons, no contraband, trying to preempt any claims it was somehow a security threat.
And this whole mission, it wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was a direct response to the situation in Gaza, which, as you know, is just catastrophic.
Horrific. The sources we looked at describe Gaza facing this terrible siege, the population genuinely on the verge of famine.
People collapsing in the street.
Yeah, people literally collapsing. Dozens dying every day from illnesses that should be preventable, from lack of food, lack of water. One activist even called it an intentional starvation of babies. Just devastating accounts.
The numbers themselves are hard to even comprehend. Since October 2023, reports say at least 147 people, including 88 children, died just from starvation.
And that's on top of the wider conflict toll. Nearly 60,000 Palestinians, mostly women and children, reportedly killed since October 7th.
It puts Gaza's entire population, 2.4 million people, right on the brink. And this is all happening under Israel's blockade, right, which has been going on for 18 years.
18 years. And then, reportedly, all crossings were closed completely back on March 2nd, effectively just sealing it off from aid.
So facing that kind of reality, what drives someone like Chris Smalls, a labor leader from the U.S., to get on that boat? What did the sources say about his personal reasons?
They sound deeply personal, actually. He talked about being a father. Said he didn't want his kids growing up in a world like this, that he was having nightmares seeing images of injured and killed babies.
That's powerful.
Yeah. He framed it as taking a stand as a father, as a labor leader, but also just as a U.S. taxpayer. He said he was putting his life on the line because states, governments have failed so abysmally.
And he made a point of saying it wasn't about them, the activists.
He did emphasize this is not about us, it's about the people of Gaza. A very clear declaration of purpose.
Okay, so they have this clear purpose, this motivation, but the journey itself was fraught with challenges even before the final interception. This wasn't the first attempt, was it?
No, not at all. There's a history here. A previous flotilla attempt, just over a month before the Handala, was reportedly sabotaged, nearly sunk, apparently, by Israeli drones.
And then there was the Madeline.
All right, that was intercepted last month. Again, in international waters, 12 international activists detained then, including some very high-profile names like Greta Thunberg and Rima Hassan, a French member of European Parliament.
And of course, people might remember the Mavi Marmor incident back in 2010.
A tragic precedent. 9 people killed then.
Mm.
It really does set the stage for the kind of dangers these activists knew they could be facing.
But the sources suggest it wasn't just about potential interception at sea. There were allegations of direct sabotage against the Handala itself, even before it properly got going.
Yes, some really quite specific claims. One account details how Israel apparently broadcast on its national news their intention to stop the ship leaving Italy.
Which they admitted was a crime.
Reportedly, yes. An admitted crime apparently still under investigation. And then there was physical stuff found on the boat.
Like what?
The crew discovered the rotor part of the engine, I assume had been tied down in a really abnormal way with heavy rope, clearly designed, it seems, to cause damage when the engine started.
Unbelievable. To face that even before leaving port.
It really underscores the stakes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it gets worse.
How so?
Perhaps the most alarming incident was when apparently sulfuric acid was delivered instead of fresh water.
Sulfuric acid, delivered as water.
That's the allegation. For showers, for cooking. Some crew members were actually burned. It delayed their departure by a couple of hours as well.
That's terrifying. Just highlights the extreme nature of the obstacles.
Absolutely. And even once they were underway, they weren't exactly alone. Reports mentioned Greek drones hovering above the Handala, constantly surveilling them, likely feeding data back to Israel, is the assumption.
So despite all of that, the history, the alleged sabotage, the surveillance they pressed on, until the interception happened.
Right. The sources state the Handala was seized by Israeli forces. This was near the Gaza coast on Saturday night, July 27th, 2025.
And there were 21 unarmed civilians on board. Videos apparently showed them with their hands up.
Yeah. Footage reportedly shows activists with hands raised as armed soldiers boarded and took control.
Okay, so what was Israel's official explanation for this?
Well, the Israeli Foreign Ministry put out a statement. They said the ship was stopped from illegally entering the maritime zone off the coast of Gaza and breaking the blockade.
So preventing an illegal entry and breaking the blockade.
Yes. And they added that the ship was safely making its way to Israel and all the passengers were safe. That was the official line.
But the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, the FFC, they had a very different take on it, didn't they? How did they counter that?
Completely different. The FFC used the word kidnapped. They claimed the activists were kidnapped by Israeli soldiers.
Kidnapped. That's strong language.
It is. And crucially, they argued that Israel has absolutely no jurisdiction in international waters where the interception reportedly took place.
And they based that on?
On an International Court of Justice ruling from over a year before. So they're directly challenging the fundamental legality of Israel's actions based on international law.
This brings us to the treatment of the activists after detention, particularly Chris Smalls. There were some serious allegations there.
There were. Reports allege that when he arrived at an Israeli prison, Chris Smalls was, and I quote, physically assaulted by 7 uniformed individuals.
Assaulted? How?
The specific allegations are that he was choked and kicked in the legs. Apparently, there were visible signs of violence on his neck and back afterwards.
And the FFC highlighted something else about his treatment, didn't they? Something about differential treatment.
Yes, they pointed out that Smalls was reportedly the only black member of the flotilla. And when his lawyer finally got to see him, he was surrounded by 6 members of Israel's special police unit.
6 officers.
6. A level of force, the FFC claims, that wasn't used with the other detained activists. They see that as significant.
Thankfully, the story doesn't end there. He was released along with the others.
Yes, some reports indicate they were released from custody by Tuesday, July 29th, and Smalls was apparently described as being in good spirits.
Okay, let's connect this specific incident back to the wider legal context surrounding Israel right now. It seems particularly relevant.
It really does. As you know, this is happening while the International Criminal Court, the ICC, has active arrest warrants out for Prime Minister Netanyahu and his former defense minister Gallant.
For alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza.
Exactly. And on top of that, Israel is also facing that genocide case at the International Court of Justice, the ICJ.
So how does the Handala incident fit into that?
Well, the FFC's claim of kidnapping in international waters, especially citing that previous ICJ ruling, you could see how that might be used as further evidence or context in those ongoing cases.
Reinforcing arguments about disregard for international law, perhaps?
Potentially, yes. It adds another layer, another specific incident to the scrutiny Israel is under internationally, both at the ICJ and potentially for the ICC's investigations.
Now, looking beyond the immediate legal sphere, Chris Smalls himself has been very outspoken about perceived complicity, hasn't he? Not just from governments, but corporations, too.
Extremely outspoken. He directly called out Amazon, his former employer, and the company he famously unionized.
What was his specific claim about Amazon?
He said Amazon is participating in this genocide. That's a direct quote. His reasoning is that Amazon Web Services, AWS, their huge cloud computing division, provides technology to Israel.
Technology like?
Like for the Iron Dome missile defense system, but also for drones, for surveillance technology. He drew a direct line, saying that purchasing from Amazon is essentially supporting genocide.
That's a massive claim. And he implicated the U.S. government and corporations more broadly as well.
Yes, he used terms like complicit and participating for both the U.S. government and corporations in general. He sees it as a systemic issue.
And his criticism extended to the labor movement itself, didn't it? Even parts of the movement he's affiliated with.
Absolutely. He was critical of what he sees as mainstream unions, like the Longshoremen and the big federation, the AFL-CIO.
What was his critique there?
He claimed they've passed 0 resolutions related to the situation since October 7th, 2023. And more pointedly, he accused them of facilitating arms shipments from the U.S. to Israel, saying it happens every 15 hours for the last 21 months.
And he said,
blood is on their hands. Very strong words. He also talked about pressure from the U.S. government on unions, giving examples like President Biden's intervention with railroad strikers, or how a cargo worker strike ended quickly due to politics and dark money, as he put it.
And what about his own union leadership, the Teamsters?
That's particularly striking. He highlighted the silence of Teamsters President Sean O'Brien, who is Small's international union leader, specifically about Small's violent detention.
O'Brien didn't comment.
Apparently not, according to Smalls' perspective. And Smalls noted that around the same time, O'Brien was advertising an interview he did with Vivek Ramaswamy. The contrast for Smalls was stark. That silence from his own leader seemed telling.
And this perceived silence, it wasn't just unions or politicians. What about the media coverage?
Yeah, that was another major point raised. There was this observed silence, particularly from major mainstream U.S. media outlets, about Chris Smalls' violent detention.
Despite his profile, I mean, the Amazon union drive got huge coverage. He was invited to the White House.
Exactly. He's not an unknown figure. Yet, reports indicate only smaller, often left-leaning outlets, places like Zetio, The Grio, Jezebel, actually covered the story of his assault and detention in any detail.
Which raises questions, doesn't it, about why a story like that wouldn't get wider play.
It certainly does. It leads to questions about media priorities, maybe editorial decisions, what gets framed as important news.
But it's not all silence and complicity, is it? The sources also highlight acts of solidarity, resistance happening on various levels.
Definitely. And it's important to see that side, too. On a local level, you have some unions passing pro-Palestine resolutions. You have divestment campaigns, people pushing institutions to cut ties with Israel through the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanctions.
And internationally.
There were examples like Greek dock workers reportedly blocking shipments related to Israel. And the story of Giopoli in Italy is quite something.
That was the port that allowed the Handala to dock.
Yes, reportedly the only Italian port that would let them dock. And significantly, that port community had already divested from Israel. The local community there really came out to support the Handala, providing donations, organizing cultural events, real grassroots solidarity.
And political figures stepping up, too.
Mention was made of Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, trying to push the British government. And Rashida Tlaib in the U.S. Congress is often seen as a really powerful voice for this movement within politics.
Smalls also made a point about connecting different struggles, didn't he? Seeing this as part of a bigger picture.
He did. He made this really poignant observation about the Mediterranean Sea being a graveyard for refugees. And he pointed out that the previous flotilla, the Medellin, actually rescued some Libyan migrants they encountered.
Wow.
Yeah, for him, it's like all these struggles are connected. He saw the mission as being about saving a bit of humanity, not just in Gaza, but more broadly. They even trained the crew in search and rescue just in case they came across migrants needing help.
That adds another whole dimension to it, this idea of intersectional struggle, shared humanity.
Exactly. A much broader humanitarian vision.
Now, one last point on the reactions, the governmental responses to the detentions. There was a difference noted between how the U.S. reacted versus some European countries.
Yes, that was highlighted. Reportedly, the U.S. government did not contact the American citizens who were detained on the Handala.
No contact with their own citizens.
That's what was reported.
Yeah.
Whereas France, Spain, and Italy did apparently contact their detained citizens.
And how is that interpreted by some activists?
Some saw the U.S. lack of contact, or perhaps the European contact, as effectively legitimizing Israeli piracy. The idea being that by engaging through Israeli channels or by not protesting more forcefully, these governments were implicitly accepting the legality of the interception and detention. A subtle, but for them, significant diplomatic point.
So we've really covered a lot of ground here. We've journeyed with the Handala and Chris Smalls right from the start of their courageous humanitarian mission.
Through those reported acts of sabotage, the really dramatic interception at sea.
And then the challenging aftermath, the detention, the allegations of assault, and the release.
And throughout, Chris Smalls' message, his appeal, seems pretty urgent, doesn't it? Especially given that perceived media silence. He urged for all eyes on Handala.
He really put the onus on ordinary people, didn't he?
He called on everyday civilians, on you listening, to share and post and reshare and amplify and scream at the top of your lungs, to contact U.S. representatives, demand accountability from Israel, and push for the safety of activists.
He's basically saying if the institutions won't act, the people have to.
That's the core of his appeal, yeah. The responsibility, in his view, shifts to us.
So maybe this is the thought to leave you with. We live in a world facing these huge humanitarian crises, constant calls for international accountability. Yet here we see a case with explicit acts of alleged sabotage, violence against humanitarians.
And seemingly a lack of strong response or even widespread reporting from major institutions and media outlets.
So when that happens, what responsibility then falls onto individuals, onto grassroots movements to fill that gap? And what does that potential shift tell us about the future of humanitarian work, of advocacy in this global dynamic?